Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. Last time we met Zenon, the leader of Massalia's forces and member of the Massalian ruling council, and generally a virtuous individual who the people adore. The diplomatic situation for Massalia wasn't good. First the Helvetii to the northeast declared war on us after everyone else refused to be our friends. Then the Volcae followed up by declaring war on us as well, meaning we now have a dangerous situation where we could be attacked from two sides. We put an army in the field to try and stop the Volcae, but when they attacked, they cut off our reinforcements from the city itself, meaning Zenon's field army was isolated and then attacked by a superior force. Luckily, he had his camp set up, and using a hoplite phalanx managed to hold off the giant barbarian army by breaking their morale and killing a large number of their men. Eventually, we broke our way out of the camp and began to rout the entire enemy army, pushing the Volcae invasion back and taking a large number of battle captives. We're about to decide what to do with them, and then we have to plan a way to counteract the Volcae threat once and for all. Let's continue. In the aftermath of his victory, Zenon had rode to the council chambers, planning to confront his fellow rulers on what he saw as a personal betrayal. Moments before he entered the chamber, he learned from a local soldier that it had been the mistake of young Commander Zenon that had denied him aid, meaning his case against the council fell flat. Instead, he received their congratulations and toured the streets on a modest chariot, being thanked by people of all classes for his service. But the war had only just begun, and Zenon was soon plotting a move to make sure the Volcae never saw the walls of Massalia again. Welcome back to Massalia Tales. We're in the aftermath of Zenon's victory over the Volcae forces, and we've taken around 500 captives. I'm currently deciding what to do with them. It could be to my economic advantage to enslave them, my military advantage to just kill them. However, doing either of those options is going to lower the respect of barbarian tribes who like the Volcae for me, which could be a problem. In general, I need to try and keep as many tribes on my side as I can because they vastly outnumber me. Plus, it seems that Zenon, being a compassionate individual, would be more likely to release them. So in this case, I'm going to let them go. They rush back and cross over the border back into their own territory, but are still perilously close. Zenon ranks up as a result of his victory, which is always good news. You can also see we've got a wet summer in the province, which is unfortunate because it prevents unit replenishment. The enemy army somehow has some full strength regiments left in it. I guess some of their regiments must have not engaged in that last battle. Overall, they're much weaker than my local forces, so I can defeat them if I want to. The problem was I have a few units who are a little bit injured and they're not replenishing because of the wet summer. However, I knew that if I sent them back inside the city, they would be able to replenish because there are large replenishment bonuses for being in a city, which is the flip side of your men causing a public order penalty for being in there. So those two most damaged regiments are going to go and replenish some of their troops by being under Zenon's command. Meanwhile, the remainder of Zenon's forces are going to pursue those Volcae. And I'm going to auto-resolve this fight because we have a giant advantage against them and go for the generic auto-resolve stance. And that's going to pretty much get rid of all of them. The Volcae threat has been temporarily at least eliminated. We capture a few more of the enemy. This time I decided to send them to Massalia to work and boost our economy since there wasn't that many of them. The army ranks up, reaching level 2 in military traditions, which is always good news, and now Toosa is undefended but for its garrison, which doesn't look terribly strong. It has a lot of armed Gallic townsfolk who probably won't do very well against my hoplites. So I have the option of attacking them now, well, at least getting near to attacking them now. I didn't want to this turn. I wanted to pull back into my own territory so that I could recruit a couple of new units before I go into the attack, just because I want my army to be powerful in case it gets attacked by someone else while it's over there.
You say had better please my ears.
I wanted to see whether the Volcae would in fact accept peace if they would become my client state. They weren't willing to do that, which was pretty much my deal-breaking condition for not attacking them now that they're weak. So I am going to go and in fact attack them shortly. The Helvetii didn't want peace either. I thought maybe, even though they haven't attacked me yet, they might have given up on the idea, but they haven't. So in the next turn I've recruited some new units into Zenon's army. I also noticed this Insubre's army has wiped out the Ligurians, which is possibly a very dangerous thing. They can't quite reach Massalia in their next turn, but in 2 turns time, when they've replenished some of their movement points, they'll be able to attack Massalia at will. If they just suddenly declare war and attack, there's nothing I can do about that. This means that having Zenon's army over in Toosa could be extremely dangerous. It would leave just Gelon and his limited men to defend the city, and I suspect the Insubres probably could defeat them if they really wanted to. However, I decided I needed to gamble and exploit the weakness of the Volcae while I could. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with a situation where I continue to be attacked from all sides. If I can just take out the enemy in Toosa, I don't even have to garrison it. I can just leave it as a line of defense that will buy some time for any invasions coming from the west towards Massalia. So I go into attack. The balance bar isn't in my favour. The enemy's garrison is apparently quite strong. It has a whole load of slingers in it, but I thought my cavalry advantage will be able to defeat them quite easily, and the rest of their melee infantry should be inferior to my own, even though mine aren't at full strength. So I'm going to go into the battle and see if I can take out this army and then go on to take Toosa itself. Zenon. The tribe chieftains are aghast at his actions from months ago. They do not mourn the dead men of the headhunters, for we know those men died with glory. They fear surrendering. The surrendered men of the headhunters were released, with new indemnities to the Massalians. Those that did not concede were killed or enslaved. Zenon has played his cards well to the masses, which the tribe chieftains detest. Now Zenon is at our doorstep, and the chieftains fear Volcaean love for the Greeks. After all, our culture has already been tested by Greek influence. Peace, the masses cry, as they see men preparing for battle. Our last chance, the chieftains claim, for freedom. Now they have me leading Volcae's glorious last stand, which I fear is our demise.
That's all I wanted.
And you get them, along with the chance for glory.
Sir! The general's waving, sir!
The Massalian forces slowly advance through a small forest, staying hidden for now as they begin to size up what sort of position the Volcae are going to take up. We are the attacker in this battle, so we are obligated to charge to them if they decide to stand their ground. Across this big plain we can see a single regiment of enemy heavy cavalry marauding around. They're probably going to select the location the enemy plan to defend. The rest of their forces are just coming onto the map. We can see they have a selection of these armed townsfolk who look like light infantry, nothing too much to worry about. They have these heavier sword infantry who are something to worry about. They will do quite well against our hoplites, so we need to keep those guys in mind. And they have a load of Gallic tribesmen, simple line spear infantry, who will probably be defeated by our own militiamen in the centre of our army. They also have a whole load of light slingers coming up to the rear. So they took up a formation, and by the time I reached it, they were ready pretty much to attack. They decided to advance towards me just as I was forming up in front of them, ready to attack. I moved my slingers to the front, which the enemy had also done. I thought we were going to have a sling off for a while, but the enemy decided to simply advance. There was no particular skirmish phase, so after just a single volley, the entire enemy army charges at us. No particular formation for the charge, they're just coming right for the centre. Classic barbarian tactics. They're even leading with some of their lighter units, perhaps an intelligent move to soak up my missile fire. So they're going to simply rush into my centre. I didn't want my 2 units of levied troops to be in the centre because I don't want my lighter units receiving their charge, so I'm sending them to occupy the high ground above their position, a position from which they could do something useful once the lines have engaged. The enemy get close and start bombarding our lines with javelins. My light troops in front of the hoplite line take the brunt of the javs, and of course they're the men who will be most easily killed by javelins, which is unfortunate, but they're now going to get out of the fight altogether. It's time for the real fight to begin. My swords and hoplites are going to receive all of the enemy troops and try and lock them into position. Here the hoplites are more worried about not being hit by projectiles until the very last moment. They spot these guys coming down to fight them and then start setting up a hoplite phalanx, ready to just become an impenetrable wall that the enemy will struggle to get through. In the centre I have all of my militia hoplites who are backed up by true hoplites behind them in case they break. I'm just seeing how the militia do. On my right flank, the enemy have attacked with their garrison warriors, their strongest melee unit, and I'm using my javelins to try and thin their numbers out because they could potentially do serious damage. They are fighting with my true hoplite units rather than just militia, which will give me a good advantage, means I'm not going to be defeated as quickly. However, I have a giant cavalry advantage in this battle, as has been mentioned, and I use that to simply rout that unit right from the beginning to get rid of their most powerful men. Meanwhile, my other cavalry need to do something about the enemy's massive armadas of slingers rushing about at the back, so I'm going to keep them occupied with cav. I'm also keeping the enemy's general occupied with cav. He has superior cavalry, which means the longer that fight goes on, the more likely it is my unit's going to be wiped out, so I need to try and get over there and help them as soon as possible. My little position up on the hill has also been attacked by Gallic garrison warriors, so while I was trying to keep my light troops out of the main part of the fighting, they've actually been attacked by one of the enemy's best units and are now in trouble. Plus, half of their numbers have rushed off chasing some enemy slingers. I ordered them to attack and didn't notice that the slingers were simply leading them right off the map. You can see I've just ordered them to start coming back once I noticed they had rushed off there. The problem is now they're being attacked from two sides. The slingers they were chasing turn around and start slinging into their back, and as they advance, there's another unit of slingers in front of them slinging into their front. So they're taking pretty big casualties, and because they are a low morale unit, they're going to break as a result of that bombardment. Back in the main fight, the enemy is breaking themselves. A lot of their units are falling back and doing lots of force cycle charges as they rout, decide not to rout, come back in, and then I receive them again against the phalanx. But I am also outflanking the main body of their troops. Many of their tribesmen are now getting out of here. Zenon himself has moved in to take part in the fighting with these tribesmen backing up the militia as we try and push the enemy off the field altogether. Their morale hasn't quite broken. We need to kill a few more of them to make them a little bit more apt to fall back. My cavalry, who do need to rear charge them, are currently busy saving the levies on top of the hill. You managed to rout those garrison warriors using the cav, so the levies were not destroyed, which is very good news. Even though these units are routing, they're still fighting pretty well. It looks like my levies can't take them out, so my cavalry are going to have to run them down to inflict any casualties on them, unfortunately. Back in the main fight, you can see we're beginning to overwhelm the enemy. I'm getting some rear attacks on some of their units. These tribesmen here are holding out really well, probably because these hoplites aren't really pressing them as heavily as they could be. I probably didn't order them to attack. They're probably just standing there and watching. They need to press into the rear. Unfortunately, they're not doing it, so the enemy are holding out longer than they should have. The unit I mentioned out fighting with the slingers is now completely gone. They've lost almost all their men to the effects of the enemy slingers and are routed from the field. So the enemy slingers are now still at large and are slinging into my big blobs of troops, which is annoying because they're going to be doing moderate casualties actually. Now the enemy's heavy cavalry are fighting on against my lighter cav. I haven't taken too many casualties so far. I was actually quite happy with how my cavalry did holding off the enemy's heavier units. I'm going to break some of those cavalry off from that engagement because we need to go and do something about the enemy slingers. So I'm going to try and get as many spearmen as I can to go and engage with the enemy's general cav, whilst my light cavalry are going to chase down these slingers, just getting them out of range of my troops and then actually coming and killing them. It only takes a few casualties among these slinger units to rout them entirely, so all I need to do is come in, fight them for a few seconds and move on to the next one. In this case, the next one is right behind the enemy, so I'm just going to move through this unit and attack the next one. They're going to get out of there pretty sharpish. Overall, the enemy slingers don't stand much chance against these, medium cav. They're not really light cav. They're sort of listed as light cavalry, but actually they can be used as medium cavalry. They're very strong in melee. They have one more slinger unit right at the back there who's currently engaging with my cavalry. I'm lining up to attack them. The enemy general is now being engaged by my foot soldiers. I've got some militiamen, and I believe Zenon himself has moved up to engage with the enemy general. And those spearmen have actually killed quite a few of them. The survivors, about half the regiment, are going to get out of there. So now that their general's running, all of their surviving units probably aren't too confident. Here my cavalry are going to run down these slingers right on the edge of the map. The slingers are still trying to escape, they're probably in skirmish mode, but there's not much hope for them. These cavalry can easily close the distance. And even though they seem confident, according to the tooltip here, the second these cavalry hit, they are going to lose that confidence and realise that they are definitely going to die if they fight on, and they just rout off the field. They had a few other units on top of the hill who were coming back from routing, but they decide not to come back once the rest of their army is defeated. So it's a decisive victory for the Massalian forces. We've destroyed the garrison troops of Toosa, which means now we can move on the town itself and should be able to take it without too many losses, especially considering the fact that this battle went surprisingly well. We didn't lose many men ourselves, but let's see exactly what happened in the battle results. Like water on rock. Come on, get the wounded out of here. The enemy wounded too. You heard me. Get them onto the baggage train. We'll take them with us to pacify the town. No warrior, Greek or Gaul, should be denied the chance to return home before they die. Thank you. This victory was almost too easy. Even without much knowledge of commanding troops, when the enemy is so simple, there is little need for cunning, only for fortitude and patience. The next time an enemy dare stand against us, I will know to trust in our strength and see them away at the behest of 1,000 levelled spears. After the battle, we can see that Zenon has lost about 300 men for the defeat of about 1,800 enemy troops. Many of the regiments in the enemy's garrison are gone. I'm going to choose to release the captives. I believe releasing captive garrison units doesn't do anything. They can't go back to their regiments. I don't know if that's true or not. But regardless, there's very few garrison units left defending the town of Toosa itself. I realised I could use my spy standing close by to actually kill off some more of the garrison by poisoning them. The problem with that is it's going to cost a moderate amount of money, and I'm actually in a bit of a financial crisis because this big army that Zenon has costs pretty much my entire Turnley income to upkeep, which means I'm not making any money. So I can't really go spending 500 or so gold on spy actions at the moment, so I'm not going to bother, but I also don't really need to. You can see from the balance bar here, there is a just visible slither of enemy power, but for the most part, the enemy stand no chance. They are going to stand and fight because they have no choice. So I'm just going to auto-resolve this fight using the protective stance, the stance that reduces allied casualties to the absolute minimum, but will still allow me to win the battle in this case. So the province is ours effectively. We have a bunch of choices as to what to do with Toosa. We can capture it, loot it, subjugate it, which essentially forces the Volcae to be my client state. I'm not too interested in that. We can sack it, just destroy it, steal their stuff, and leave them to it. Or we can do the final option, which is raise, which pretty much just destroys everything and makes the Volcae hate you, but also doesn't occupy it. I'm going to go with occupy because this province is part of Provincia, the province in which Massalia is in. So by capturing it, I've now unified the province overall, which will allow me to enact edicts in a moment. This means my only enemy is now the Helvetii up there to the northeast, so I wanted to send Iffy and Asa to go and check out what sort of stuff they had, because they declared war on me ages ago, but we haven't seen anything of them, so I thought maybe they've built a giant war host and are about to attack during that time. In Toosa, I need to convert some of their barbarian cultural buildings into Hellenic ones. The problem is I don't have any money, as was mentioned before, and it's going to cost a bit of money to do that. There's no particular advantage to doing that right now, especially in terms of the trading field, which is pretty much the same in the Hellenic version. I can though enact an edict. We've got a couple of things to pick from. I was quite interested by the prospect of selling slaves in order to get some money. It says plus 400% wealth generated by slaves, and I did take some slaves from the Volcae, so I thought maybe this could cause me to get some of my money back and perhaps be able to pay for this army and reconstruction of Toosa. But in the end, I'm going to go with bread and games, a very generic edict which just increases the public order and gives you extra food, a nice growth style edict that's going to help us stabilize the region, which is quite unstable because both of its cities have military forces occupying them, which the people of Provincia definitely don't like. I can only do this for a short time. I want to keep them there for a moment so they can replenish troops, but once they've got all the men they need, they're going to leave the towns. Now I now share a pretty big border with the Averni, who are becoming rather powerful. I wanted to see if they'll go into non-aggression, and they won't, so perhaps that is foreboding. There's also the Cessetani in Iberia, who we now share a border with. They don't like me by the looks of things. I wondered if they'd go into non-aggression anyway, but it looks like they won't for the most part. So we're still surrounded by people who might attack us. It's not very nice that they won't go into non-aggression with us, which means they probably are planning something. All we can really do is wait to see where the next attack will come from, which we'll find out next time on Massalia Tales. With the majority of those suitable to fight among the Volcae dead or missing, the tribe had little choice but to accept the terms of Zenon's host. Toosa, their largest stronghold, was occupied by his men, under instruction to begin converting the town into a colony of Massalia. But news from the city stopped work almost at once. The coffers had run dry. Zenon's forces contained many heavy infantry known as hoplites, who required expensive equipment and training that had stretched the council's budget thin. But Zenon knew that at that moment they were weak. Sending men back home was out of the question.